I call this meeting to order at 9:09 a.m. Roll call and verification of quorum. Vice Chair McClellan.
Chair Wanjin.
Present.
Myself is present. President Lopez.
Present.
Vice President Martinez.
Present.
Consular Urchin.
Present.
Speaker Hall.
Here.
Chair Millington.
Present.
Senator DeMarla.
Here.
Senator Gell. Senator Temple.
Present.
At the Vice Chair Savage.
Present.
Graduate at Large Wilson.
Present.
Undergraduate at Large Kane.
Present.
Undergraduate at Large Allgaier.
Present.
Senator Holmes.
Present.
14 out of 15 forms verified.
Approval of the minutes. None today. I'll explain that in my announcements. Approval of the agenda. If I can get a motion, Temple.
Move to approve today's agenda.
There's been a motion to approve today's agenda. Are there any objections? Seeing none, the agenda stands approved. Announcements from me. Hey guys, just to explain, all budget hearing minutes will be approved at the next committee meeting after hearings. Just because that way we have a chance to actually make sure all the minutes are right and there's no errors in them before we approve them. Any questions? Seeing none. Announcements from the vice chair. None. Announcements from committee members. None. Announcements from non-committee members. None. Old business. None. New business. Student government legislative branch. And you can begin your presentation whenever you're ready.
Hello. How's it guys on? Okay. So yeah, student government legislative branch. I'm gonna go right into the budget because we all know what it does. Oh wait, yeah, I forgot it's a PDF, so it's gonna make it weirder. I'll just do it like that. All right. Overview of the primary budget changes that we got. Operations Senate meet and greet has been removed, so that saves about. Before it was $1,000, it saves $800 because we'd already done some cuts before the bigger cut. Office supplies were removed. That got added to exec as well as advertising and promotion. I'll go into all that in a bit. With OPS, deputy pro tempore quantity has been reduced to 1. That means the deputy pro tempore of Senate relations has been cut based on the budget. Legal assistants or legislative assistants, deputy pro tempore, fiscal chairs, and internal chairs salary were increased from 11 to 12 due to the minimum wage increase in October. Pro tempore salary was increased to 12 to 13, an hourly per week reduction for positions across the board. And then for our registration and travel fund, a reduction from 600,000 to 520, or no, it's actually 620 to 520. Apologies for that. And then the Senate working fund is a reduction from 310 to 260,000. So kind of breaking them down a little bit more. If you go to operations, Senate meet and greet, mixed bag in terms of, activeness, mixed bag in terms of actual results. So given the budget cuts, we felt to cut it as the easiest way of dealing with that. And then both for office supplies and advertising and promotion, we've consolidated that with the executive branch. So all of that, the money has not been cut, it's just been moved. And particularly with advertising and promotion, I'm of the opinion that it's going to help judicial in particular, since they always have a smaller budget. So I thought it was a good idea to do. And then moving along to OPS, Deputy Pro Tempore quantity reduction. So basically, again, when we were looking at cuts initially, we were looking at how can we avoid cuts to the Senate Working Fund and registration and travel. The easiest way we were able to do that before we realized it was way bigger cuts was the removal of the DSER position. It was removed as a paid position effectively due to the budget cuts. It effectively freed up our ability to not cut anything else. And then obviously we got the news. Minimum wage increase, they're all going up after October 1st across the board to receiving $12 an hour. The pro tempore salary, due to the removal of the DSER position, as well as had we not rose the pro temp's salary, they'd be getting paid the same as every other chair and as well as their assistants and deputies. So it's been raised to 13 an hour. And then the hourly per week reduction is that all of the OPS positions have been reduced, hourly per week reduction, which allows us to avoid further cuts. And then kind of going to the next page here, just a breakdown of what it looks like now. I'm making 18 pro temp, or not making 18, I wish. I'm getting 18 per week. The pro temp's getting 15. Legislative assistants, which also includes both my office and Pro Temp Foster's office, are getting 7 per week, with both deputies and the legislative assistants. Fiscal chairs are getting 10 per week, and internal chairs are getting 5 per week. Just kind of moving along now. Registration travel, again, from 620,000 to 520,000. This was not what we wanted, but at the end of the day, we all have to pitch into the budget cuts. So that is a $100,000 reduction to our registration and travel. And to, again, note that it continues to go down every year. Moving along to the next one, same thing here with the Senate Working Fund. For those of you, just to orient, registration travel is our CRT committee. This is our FAO committee. It has a different name on here, but it's going to be cut from 310,000 to 260. This was done to make sure that the cuts were proportional. Obviously, the registration travel budget has a way bigger budget, so they were able to take a steeper cut compared to FAO. And again, another cut for another year. Moving along to the next part, our 2 wish list items. All right, so I'll go first with the reinstatement of the DSER position. I am requesting that we look into reinstating that position within OPS. Primary reason being is that we know that our graduate assistant is being cut, which means an increased workload, as well as I'm of the opinion that maintaining the office with 2 people, especially given the scale of the cuts that we do have, makes more sense. It frees up the pro temp's time. One of the biggest responsibilities of the pro temp is to attend all of the committees, or at least have one of their deputies. Giving them 3 people versus 2 people helps with that. As well as when we were kind of brainstorming with the loss of the graduate assistant, how we can kind of take some of that responsibility so it doesn't all fall onto our advising. Something that we talked about was having them increase their role within Senate orientation and increase the role in other of the more inter-Senate things that needs to be done that hasn't been done as much. Obviously, the DSER position kind of varies by person, but this is something that we would like to request, as well as we would like to request an increase to our training, development, and retreat budget line. Currently, we have 15,000, or not 15,000, we have 1,500. We would like it increased to 3,500. Senate currently has 45 senators, and currently with a budget of 1,500, we're spending about $33 per person. An increase to 3,500 would allow us to spend $77 per person. If we kept going, it would 4,500 allows $100 per person, and 5,500 allows $122. I'm not asking for any of that. What I will say is, and I think we're going to have this conversation later, is the proportionality of our retreat and training budget when it looks at the student government as a whole. I know it's not going to be a fun conversation, but at the end of the day, my branch is the biggest, and we suffer because our budget's not bigger. And I would like to see it increased, or I would like for us all to have a more equitable standing on that issue. Moving along to the final thing, including recommendations. We're making substantial cuts. All this is basically just to say, I know that when you look at the Senate Working Fund and you look at registration travel, there's money signs in everybody's eyes because it's a pocket that can be used for other things. I would highly encourage that we don't cut more substantially from it as much as we can avoid. If we have to make slight cuts to pay for other things, that's fine. But at the end of the day, these funds go directly towards students. When we look at the A&SF fees, their student fees. And what more can you do than put that back into our RSOs and put that back into students being able to travel to different conferences, being able to host events here, whether they be cultural, whether they be educational. At the end of the day, we exist to serve the students, and this is the most direct way that we do serve students, and we serve them throughout the year. It also contributes, I didn't put it on here, but it does contribute to the programming that happens. A lot of times these RSOs do partner with other agencies, things like that, but they get money through Senate, and they get money through the Senate Working Fund and through registration and travel. Continued cuts to that's going to just decrease our programming overall, as well as decrease the ability of our students to represent UCF, both here and around the country and around the world. So with that, I'll now take any questions.
I'm going to take Urched, Gal, Lopez, Temple.
2 questions, if I may.
You may.
First, I see for the DSER position, it's around 3,000. Do you have is there a more exact number if we were to actually go about doing it? Is it 3,000, closer to 4, closer to less?
To be frank, I think specifically if we just looked at the current OPS line, it's probably around that, I would think, because they're being paid the same. If you look at what the D-Leg is currently being paid in OPS, that would mean that.
Okay.
It would be they would be paid the exact same.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I guess it's more based off of the changes. Looks like it's more if you increased it to $12 an hour, it looks like it's $2,000.
Okay. And then my second question is, I definitely agree with your sentiment regarding more towards retreat and training development for the legislative branch. It seems like it's needed, but the equitable argument about going based on per person, my question is more along the lines of what exactly you'd be doing with the money for retreat. I know you'd bring all your senators, but what are they doing? Are they planning things for the year? Do you have a plan for it, or anything along those lines?
Yeah, so basically any more money allows us to do more things. Like I said, if you're looking at it based off of $33 per person, that's nothing to do anything. Our Senate retreat involved us in a classroom eating Papa John's pizza. So comparatively, if we had more money, we'd be able to do more, possibly go somewhere around the Orlando area, or even just do something here, but actually get more quality food, more quality things, maybe bring other speakers, things like that. All of our retreats are based around getting work done, though. It's not a vacation. It's never been a vacation. But at the end of the day, the goal is to do work, particularly a lot of training for senators. This will allow us also pay for potential trainings, because obviously they're free ones, but we would like to kind of give our senators the best, particularly because a lot of senators end up in other agencies around UCF that they either are leading agencies, they're involved in other agencies, so it benefits everyone to be training a group of students who in particular have shown leadership capability.
For sure. Let me rephrase what I meant, because I didn't mean it directly. I understand what you're spending on now, and you'd use it so you could spend some more, so they'd have a better quality of the retreat. But I meant more so, what type of work will the increased budget allow you to get done here? Where some organizations, when they have their retreat, they are planning and programming certain events throughout the entire calendar year. What would you be going about doing on your retreat, and how would the extra money help you? Do your duties more efficiently?
Well, the biggest thing is it would allow us to have a multi-day retreat. Even when we looked at the retreat that we did in the fall, we were only able to do about 4 or 5 presentations at most about Senate-related things, because we can only do one day, because we don't have the money to feed people multiple days like that, particularly given the fact that it's 45 plus. But even if we just broke it down to, let's say, instead we use this retreat budget for Senate leadership, not all of Senate, you're still talking about 19, 20 people. So the question continues of, yes, we would have that money for more, but at the same time, when we look across student government, it's disproportional. So I feel like if we are investing fairly in our leadership, then it would either require an increase or everyone equalizing out how much money each branch is getting for that.
Gal?
Present and voting.
So noted at 9:23 p.m. or a.m., not p.m. We are not in Senate. Okay, Lopez.
Dylan, first off, thank you for your presentation. So my question is more so, I'm just trying to feel what you think is best. So I see that you all have your Senate banquet. Given that passing of the gavel includes all three of the branches, and all three of the branches are invited, and it is an end of year banquet essentially. I do truly, after our conversations like last week, I do, and based off your answers today, I do think that you all need an increase to your retreat budget. Would you be potentially open to using the $2,000 that you have budgeted for the Senate banquet to increase your retreat budget?
No.
Okay.
Primarily because we've already taken substantial cuts. I did forget other cuts did include our entire caucus budget and other things like that. I don't have an interest of transferring money over. I'd rather just have more money to do more.
Okay, thank you.
Temple.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. Morning, Mr. Speaker Hall. My question for you regards the CRT and FAO funding, because I know, as you said, they had taken substantial cuts for the second year in a row now. If there were in some way any possibility that there were funds opened up for after today, do you think it would be at all possible you think you'd be open to increasing those funding amounts again? Because as you know as well as I, that both CRT and FAO are vital to Senate's operations. So I was wondering where you stand on increasing the amounts of funds that CRT and FAO can allocate moving forward.
So I'd love to do that, but there are a lot of other agencies and departments that need that more because of the types of cuts that they had. At the end of the day, yeah, I'm never going to say no to that. But at the same time, like, I'm not advising the committee to use excess money for that. For instance, again, when we talked all yesterday about how much the student union is taking a hit and how much other department agencies are, I don't have any increases. Realistically would be minimal at best anyways. We're talking about, $5,000, $10,000 from a budget of $520,000. Yeah, I'd love more, but at the end of the day, we're not in a position to get a substantial enough amount more to justify it not just going towards something else that still benefits students.
Martinez, Holmes, Wilson, go. No, not anymore. Holmes, Wilson, go.
Hi, I may have a follow-up if that's okay, depending on the answer. Hi, Dylan. Thanks for your presentation. It was great. I just want to ask like a clarifying question. So sorry, I'm trying to navigate this. So for in the summary, it says it's about 800,000. That's including the cut, right? The 13.7 cut, correct? That's accounting the cut that you're making.
Where are you looking for that?
It is sorry, I'm trying to go around here. It's on the summary page for your budget request packet.
Oh, so you're saying in the total category?
Yeah, that's including the cut, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And if you were to, I guess, this is the follow-up. And if you were, because it says no higher than 1 million, if you were to reach that threshold, what would you account for in that total, if that makes sense? Let me know if I need to clarify that.
Just to correct.
Do you want me to clarify real quick?
Yeah, go for it.
So the no higher than 1 million was the flat budget from last year with no cut at all. And then the budget packet was revised to include the 13.7.
Okay, then disregard my question.
And if I can also just clarify that our operations budget from last year was around 11,000, so it has decreased to about 7,500.
Wilson.
So first, thank you for being here. If you could just kind of clarify, because in the grand scheme of the budget, we're talking about smaller numbers here, so I don't want you to spend too much time. So when it comes to the professional development that comes with the banquet versus the retreat, what's like the difference there between like the value with the banquet? Because I kind of agree with what President Lopez says, maybe allocating that to the retreat budget, because I feel like that probably would be more of service to Senate's purpose.
Yeah, particularly when it comes to the banquet, we're able to honor senators throughout the year and their contributions, things like that. The purpose is not retreat based. I'm fine with even, if we had to cut the banquet budget, we could, but at the end of the day, they serve two different purposes. So I don't see shifting it as necessary. And again, it just goes back to the overall equity argument that would still not be fixed even if we moved this 2,000 over to the retreat budget.
Joe.
Hi. Okay. So I see it wanting to reinstate the DSER position.
because the GA position would be cut. Do you have a specific like outline or plan as to what the responsibilities of the DSER would be, or would you allow, I guess, that discretion under the pro temp? And I guess you haven't lived in a situation where you have not been without a DSER and a GA, but could you just name some of the responsibilities that would have to fall on the advising team if this, or yeah, exactly why this position is important?
Yeah, so basically, statutorily, very vague what the position does do. My intention is to both expand the scope and narrow it at the same time in terms of narrow down like actual specific benchmark things that the DSER needs to be doing versus just broad advising the role kind of assumes. And the DSER position is definitely varied depending on who occupies the position in terms of what they do and what they don't do. So one of the areas that we looked in particular, Senate orientation, currently Pro Tem Foster oversees those. They are time consuming. And one of the things that the graduate assistant does do is send out the introductory emails, things like that. So something we'd want to do is basically have the DSER take on that role of the graduate assistant so that our advising team is not kind of burdened with that, of having to do that all the time on top of everything else they do. It would also involve them organizing and facilitating orientation, as well as something I did talk with Pro Tem Foster about is having them take more responsibility when it comes to like making sure that senators are doing their requirements, particularly things like the financial training, workplace harassment training, things along those lines. So it would increase we don't want to just bring the position back just for the sake of bringing it back. We're trying to bring it back with the intentionality of making sure that it doesn't become redundant because there is a need for it, particularly again, what I said about the committee thing. That would be a huge strain on the actual pro temp, especially if the D leg is unavailable for a lot of different things or vice versa, that having that third person does benefit them after kind of conversing with them. But again, and my initial understanding was we didn't know about the cuts. And then obviously we were trying our best to avoid cutting into the Senate Working Fund and registration travel, and that opened that up for us. But now we've reached the point where we did have to cut it. But given the grand scheme of things and the actual cost being even less than I realized it was to maintain the position, I feel like it's worth keeping if it makes a more efficient pro temp office.
Richard?
I kind of just wanted to rephrase a prior question just so I can have some clarification. Regarding retreat, I'm still definitely in favor of giving some more, but I was more asking along the lines of work. At a different organization where I ran in an executive retreat, we spent the entirety of 2 days planning a budget, creating events, planning throughout a calendar year, like picking venues, XYZ, that's the tangible work we did. We like set up certain events, created certain events, put them on the calendar, found whether it was conflicting on certain dates, and yada, 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 that type of thing. So like, I know like you will be doing work, but just so like I have a better understanding, like what is the work doing? Like I get you need more meals, a better quality training so they can fully like take part and do it. But I just want to be more along the lines of like what they're doing so we know if we're increasing it, this is what we're funding them to do.
Yeah, the biggest thing is to do exactly that because Senate does a lot of that. The difference is Senate has to do it either in here or in a conference room to figure it out or over group me. I would love to have different entities able to, in a potential retreat, break out, potentially caucus leadership breaks out and actually has a group-wide conversation that involves planning different events like the disability fair that we do in the spring, like our Black History Month event, et cetera, and have that physical ability to communicate with each other. It would allow Senate leadership to break apart, to be able to talk about Senate-wide initiatives and particularly how we engage with the legislative branch, how we engage with the executive branch and election commission. It would allow ENA to potentially start planning for the upcoming SG election. It would allow for SBA to work and brainstorm ideas for how we can better serve our student population. It would allow GAP, if anything, it would actually allow GAP a separate time specifically to maybe focus on the initiatives for Day at the Capitol or other ways that we can make it a more dynamic experience. The opportunities and ideas are endless. It would be up to the next speaker to determine what best way to do that, whether they want to still have it here on campus or they'd like to have it off campus. But it would facilitate the ability to have more of that work done. Yeah.
Millington, then Holmes.
If you know this data off the top of your head, could you provide the committee with a comparison of the per person breakdown for retreats, like from the other branches compared to legislative?
I could, but I'd rather not, because I'm trying to avoid doing that. But if we would like to review it, more than happy to.
Holmes, Wilson, or Chud?
This is more of a clarifying question for Urched. Not question,
You may.
point. Okay. So essentially for our last Senate retreat, we didn't get to do like much because of the time constraint. So like as a caucus chair, I would have loved to like give a presentation on my caucus or like have a moment to brainstorm with other caucuses and stuff, but we didn't get the opportunity to because we went like through all our committees, our offices and things like that. So I guess as like a point of clarification, like if we had more time, we would be able to like let new incoming senators and senators who aren't involved in caucuses know about caucuses, what we do and how we can plan and brainstorm for the future on how we can like impact students better, if that makes sense.
A quick reminder that just because half of this committee is composed of senators does not mean we should be spending more time and energy on this than anything else. We have Wilson, then Urched, then Lopez.
I was going to agree with you on that and motion to move to debate. If
There's been a motion to go to debate. Are there any objections? Seeing none, we're now in debate. Urched?
Based on everything he presented, and based on the number he already cut, I think to me it's most fair, especially with cutting the graduate assistant. I think putting the DSER back is fine, depending on what the committee thinks. They're still going to be over the percent that we need them to cut. I think they should take 1,500 away from their banquet, leaving them 500. And if it's just to honor the senators, they should have more than enough money to do it. Our passing of the gavel has all three branches included anyways. That add 1,500 back to the retreat. And then I think we could just add another 500 to that, giving them 3,500 total for the retreat, which I think's a more fair amount that they'll be able to do with. And they're still going to be definitely way over the 13.7%. So I don't see a problem with any of these suggestions, but I'd like to hear other committee opinion.
Go.
I would be okay reinstating the DSER position. I would not be okay cutting the banquet. I think that that's I think it's unfair to ask because the legislative branch has already cut. I think it was like 22% last year, and now we're asking for an additional more cuts from the legislative branch. I think that personally, training and retreat should go up because looking at just cross comparison of how much is spent per branch, 5,500 for training for the executive, and I think increasing the legislative branch who has 75, 72, 70 plus senators within its agency is I think fair. But that's just my opinion on that. I think reinstating the DSER is fine, but I think cutting the banquet would be a disservice to the agency as a whole.
I know some of you weren't at the last couple meetings. We have discussed multiple times that we are not going to be turning this into a fight between legislative and exec. So please avoid cross comparison between the two entities right now, especially when we have not even looked at the executive branch budget. Urched?
The argument regarding, I don't want to turn this into just fighting. Many entities, departments, and agencies have taken year-over-year cuts. So to say we shouldn't cut something because it's already been cut, I know we all have partial ties to our own entities right now, but I still really agree with what I said in the beginning. I think I don't want to cut their banquet budget entirely. I want to cut most of it, give the money for retreat, give a little more for retreat, and then bring it back to DSER. I think considering all the circumstances, I think that's fair. I think Dylan already mentioned beforehand that he'd be okay with reducing the banquet budget, which is what I had said. We're not cutting it in its entirety. I think this is, I think it's the most fair thing I've said. I'd like to hear Dylan's, I guess, if he's okay with that for the banquet budget, if that number works or if he thinks it would work. And if it doesn't, then we can try and think of something else as a committee.
Would you like to direct a question to the presenter?
Yes.
You may.
So the numbers I had thrown out now, the reduction of the banquet from 2,000 to 500, moving the 1,500 towards retreat, adding another 500, bringing the sum total of 3,500, plus adding the DSER position back of 3,000. Do you think those changes would help? And do you think it wouldn't do too much of a disservice taking away the 1,500 from the banquet?
I do have concerns about only having $500 for the banquet in terms of what that facilitates, again, for 45 people. That means we're getting very cheap quality things, which at the end of the day, if that's what the committee wishes, then fine, we're fine downsizing. But I will echo Senator Gell's comments that we are taking steep cuts regardless. And I just feel like it's going to decrease the impact of the banquet when there are other ways to still get the desirable outcome for these other things.
Wilson, I'd seen your hand for a moment. Did you still want to debate?
I'm good right now.
Lopez?
Just to clarify before I ask or I say my debate, you would be okay reducing to 500, but it draws concerns based off quality of what the banquet would look like.
No, I would say
Okay.
like to 1,000. Like it gives us flexibility for the banquet.
So there's I have a recommendation. So currently Airmark gives us a credit for meals. This is typically used for passing of the gavel. There's always around $1,000 left over. So to help alleviate the stress of the $500, Airmark isn't like the best food, but it's okay food. It's what we eat at passing of the gavel. The legislative branch for their banquet, we can use 1,000 of those dollars for and use that credit for the Senate banquet if that's something that you would be open to. Again, I'm not trying to sit here and negotiate with you. It's just a recommendation if that would help.
If I can clarify something.
You may.
Just to clarify, up until we saw the massive cuts, there was never any intention of raising the Senate retreat budget. This was after review of Senate-wide and seeing the differences without getting into it, that we just felt it would be more equitable. I'm personally of the opinion that we should all be taking cuts to the retreat more than likely. But at the end of the day, because we're not, it then became an equity issue of how much Senate is getting compared.
Temple?
Sorry, I have my own recommendation for this banquet retreat thing. It's far-fetched. It's kind of out of the blue, but I was thinking of moving 250 from the banquet to the Senate retreat, and that would equalize each of them at 1,750. I would like to get some feedback from the speaker on that matter.
It equalizes what?
Sorry, you would have 1,750 both for the retreat and for the banquet as well. It's not too much of a movement, but it would probably hopefully give you enough for the retreat or banquet. Although again, it's a loose idea.
I'll put it like this. I'm open to any idea the committee has, but understand that when we get to later things, that this conversation will come up again, and that is the reason why we're having this conversation, to be frank.
Again, to please not nitpick things that we know. Urched, then Kane.
I guess if we were for the banquet though, because to my understanding, the passing of the gavel is kind of our only banquet. It's our own joint banquet in terms of being equitable, because we don't do a separate banquet for everybody else either. So putting 2,000 towards it, I feel like could be better. I still agree with your sentiment that retreats across the board should be going down, but still giving you a more proportional increase. But a banquet which is only Senate specific versus our banquet, which is already inclusive of all three branches, moving that money towards the retreat. I think, it's of my personal opinion that retreats are of importance for leadership to really create your schedule, to plan everything together. And the banquet to me is of less importance, as there's already one joint banquet. And to my knowledge, there doesn't seem to be any individualized banquet for the other branches. So I am honestly more in favor of just scratching the banquet and just putting it all towards the retreat, which has seemed to be more of a concern, or maybe somewhere else that you would suggest. But I really just want to hear committee opinions on this matter, because I want to reiterate again that we are arguing over like 0.01% of the budget right now. These are a handful of thousands that aren't making a big difference. So the quicker we can just come to a consensus, the more we can focus on the larger issues.
Yeah, I was gonna say I've started a timer. Y'all have 6.5 minutes left because this is a debate over less than $5,000. Gell, then Wilson. Or sorry, Kane. You were up next. Kane, Gell, Wilson.
I would just like to say, as a person who's not part of student government at all, I think that we shouldn't be weighing the departments against each other. We should be looking at how to best meet the individual needs of each department. So comparing the different branches and saying everything needs to be even instead of looking at them on an individual basis, to me, is just like a waste of time.
Gell, then Wilson.
I was going to make a motion to see the next agency. Move to see the executive branch.
Objection.
I would object to that. I was
Do you
gonna,
withdraw? Okay, Wilson.
I was just to move the process along, and I was kind of agreeing with the comptroller's perspective here when it comes to unity and everything. So I think I'll make a motion to zero out the line 150 of the banquet and then increasing the line 149 for the Senate retreat to go from the current 1,500 to 3,500.
So to be clear, all of those numbers are encapsulated in operations now. It's just adjusting things within operations. Those
All right.
lines are already zeroed.
All right. Yes, I'm doing that.
Could you rephrase what those numbers now, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So just again, because there's already a passing the gavel and the retreat is valuable and for training purposes, professional development, moving $2,000 over to retreats to make it now 3,500, and then having a banquet be zeroed out with, of course, there is a will for the Senate to want to do a banquet. As President Lopez mentioned, there is that $1,000 credit that is usually left over from passing the gavel from Aramark. So that could be decided later. But I just think to move the conversation along, something needs to be happening.
Cool. So that's not actually an amendment because that's all in operations and it's just moving things. So right now that amendment is just leaving operations as is. Urchik, then McClellan.
So we don't just talk about too much of this any longer. I think we all can, they have the money to do it. I think we should just add money back to the DSER position. I'll make a motion to do that after if no one else has anything else, and then just move along to the next entity for the sake of time.
McClellan.
Move to amend line 144 OPS, adding $2,998.80, reinstating the DSER position.
That motion has been made. Are there any objections? Seeing none, we're now in voting procedures. With the vote count of 12 to 0 to 1, that amendment passes. Okay. I'll fix that in a second on the bill. Is there Wilson? Then
Move to see the executive branch.
there's been a motion to see the executive branch. Are there any objections? Seeing none, we're now there. Thank you, Dylan. And you may begin your presentation whenever you're ready.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just getting myself situated. Good morning, everyone. For those of you that don't know who I am, my name is Daniela Lopez, and I serve as student body president and therefore I oversee and manage the executive branch of student government. And today I'm here presenting to you our 2023-2024 fiscal year presentation. So just overall, for those of you, I know most of us are in student government, but for our at-larges, and if there's anyone tuning in at home, just overview of what the executive branch does. We organize campus-wide events to promote UCF spirit and traditions. And in addition, we provide an outlet of either programming or services to discuss a wide variety of topics that are including but not limited to academic affairs, student health, graduate outreach, sustainability, diversity and inclusion, safety, and just other important topics, whatever the student body feels needs to be represented. So, what the executive branch currently consists of is the student body president, the student body vice president, the office of the attorney general, and then we have three divisions: our division of administration, division of student affairs, and our division of communications. So just to start off with some of the budget cuts that we made to get to that 13.7% cut, currently within OPS, we have budgeted $160,034. We are reducing that by $31,798.58. Essentially, what we're doing is we are removing two cabinet member positions. For those that are in student government currently and maybe weren't aware, I just want to clarify this. During last year's administration, they had 18 cabinet members. Zelly and I made the decision to reduce two cabinet members, but up the hours that every cabinet member can work. So all of cabinet members during last year's administration had less hours to work. This year, we reduced two positions, up the hours, but unfortunately, due to the cuts, that leeway, that buffer that we had, we're just removing. And then in total, we are reducing the hours. So the president and vice president would be working 25 hours, admin 20 hours, directors 17 hours, and coordinators are 12 hours. And then we also adjusted the pay. You can see that within our budget request. As far as operations, we are requesting $19,300. I'm not gonna sit here for too long on this, but I do want to note the notable changes that we made. So like Dylan mentioned, the office supplies, we combined those funds with all the branches. They're just gonna be housed under the executive branch, but we're all in the same office. So it doesn't make sense for all of us to buy highlighters. Everyone uses the same things anyway. And then as far as the Florida Student Association, that used to be its own budget line. We zeroed that out and just moved it into operations. We just thought that made more sense. So it wasn't a decrease. There was a decrease, but we just moved the money into operations. And then for the Adobe license, that was under long-term contracts. During last year's budget hearings, this was a point of argument for some reason. So just to save us that time, we did what they wanted to do last year in committee, and we already put the Adobe license under operations as opposed to long-term contracts. As far as student initiatives, we are requesting $118,000. Student initiatives, this is essentially the budget for each cabinet member that they have to work with, and this is where programming comes out of. This is where services come out of, and essentially anything that you see the executive branch do, it comes out of student initiatives. I'm only noting the changes that we made from last year to this year. So with the Deputy Chief of Staff's budget, we increased it by $1,000. We did this because SGLC, as of right now, the council piece, so once you break off into your councils, ELC, JLC, and SLC is separated. It's just going to fall under the executive branch, but this doesn't mean that they're not going to receive their money. This essentially means the money that Senate and judicial that they had for their councils was for polos. So all of the polos would just be purchased at one time. So it ensures, since we're ordering a higher quantity, we get it at a discounted rate, and that ensures that all the councils get their polos at the same time. That way there isn't any type of advantage of, oh, I got my polo first, you got it last. It avoids that. So we are now requesting $3,750 for the Deputy Chief of Staff. As far as the Director of Student Affairs, a cut did need to be made in order for us to get to that 13.7%. And we reduced the Director of Student Affairs' budget by $4,000. So going from $19,600 to $15,600. And then the last change that happened with student initiatives, like Dylan mentioned, we combined our promo and advertising budgets with all the branches. So we upped the Director of Communications budget by $1,000, so going from $10,000 to $11,000. So essentially, this just means we buy student government promo regardless, and anytime there's a tabling event, any type of event, everyone is more than welcome to use the promo. It's not because the Division of Communications bought it, no one can use it. This is essentially just streamlining that process and ensuring all branches have equal access to our promotions budget. Just some event highlights. These are some of the events that happened this past year that were really successful. 2 weeks ago, we had Winter Wonderland. Oh, and all these events came out of the student initiatives budget. Winter Wonderland was 2 weeks ago. This was to compensate for the loss of Light Up UCF. We had over 2,000 students attend. Really fun, really great event. At the beginning of the semester, we offered free professional headshots. We had over 100 students come and get their headshots, which was really nice. Update your LinkedIn. And then the last thing, a new event that we started doing this year is we re-implemented pep rallies for football games. So this specific pep rally was for the Navy game. We honored VARC and all of our student veterans. And there isn't really a specific amount of students that impacts. It impacts whoever happens to be in the union. So the next cut came with governmental affairs. Essentially, we just decreased the budget by $650. So we're requesting $15,350 from the original $16,000 that the governmental affairs coordinator had budgeted. And then miscellaneous, these are all individual budget lines. I just didn't feel like doing an individual slide for one line, so I stuck them all on one slide. So emergency allocations, we essentially zeroed that out in order to get to that 13.7% cut. So we reduced emergency allocations by $3,000. Passing of the gavel, as we mentioned earlier, it was currently budgeted for $3,000. We're reducing it by $500. So with a total of $2,500. The President-elect Transition Fund was originally budgeted for $750, and we are reducing that budget by $450, leaving us with $300. And then here's the kicker. The Scantron and Blue Book services currently is budgeted for $20,000, and we're reducing that cost by $14,000, leaving us with $6,000 for Scantrons. And then we have long-term contracts. So currently under long-term contracts, we have budgeted $72,000 to get to that 13.7% cut. We are removing $31,000 from long-term contracts, leaving us at $41,000. The one note that I do want to make sure everyone is aware of, if we continue to cut long-term contracts, we would have to cut the LIFT program as a whole, as we can't have half a contract. So just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of that. And then last but not least, our spring event. So we are currently requesting $229,700 for Universal Nights. This isn't an increase or a decrease. The contract hasn't changed since last fiscal year. So we are remaining it as that. Currently, we have budgeted $224,700 for the contract itself and $5,000 for the transportation to Universal in case someone doesn't have a vehicle, a means to get there, you want to take your whole RSO and get on a shuttle, whatever the case may be. This is what we have. This is what we're requesting for our spring events. In all, we are requesting $560,385.42, making a total budget cut of $82,098.58. At this time, this concludes my presentation. If there's any points that require further clarification, I'll address those now. If not, thank you and I appreciate you all for taking the time and listening to me.
Any questions for Daniela? Temple, then Go, then Holmes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, President Lopez. Two questions, if I may.
You may.
So just for point of clarification, what two cabinet positions were no longer being paid?
So I'm going to give you the history with it for a second. During Austin's administration, so during the Paul Wilson administration, there was a marketing coordinator and there was an outreach coordinator that were on cabinet. We essentially combined those positions. Instead of paying two extra individuals, we combined outreach with the deputy chief of staff and marketing just within the director of communications position. So that way those individuals can work more hours. And then right now we're not cutting any further positions. They just won't have the extra hours. So we're reducing the hours, but by reducing the hours, we're technically cutting pay of two extra positions.
I just wanted that for clarification.
Yeah, no worries.
Thank you for that. My second question is regarding the Scantrons, because I saw that it took a significant cut. logistically speaking and tangibly speaking, how will that affect distribution as a whole? Like, how many Scantrons do you feasibly see being distributed over the course of the year with this cut?
Yeah, so it would just reduce, as of right now, the amount of Scantrons that individuals get. We pulled the data. If you want to look at those exact numbers, hi Shane. So as of right now, there's approximately 16,000 unique. No, not 16. It was either 16 or 12,000. One of those two numbers. We've tossed around a lot of different numbers the past couple days. But there was under 20,000 unique users that receive Scantrons. But when you look at the big long list, it looked like it was 50,000 students that came to get Scantrons, but it was people repeatedly getting Scantrons. So the only thing that would really change is you wouldn't be able to receive as many Scantrons as you're currently used to. Personally, as a freshman, I would just, every time I was in the office, I would grab Scantrons for the sake of I could grab them. And I have those same Scantrons sitting in a folder on my desk. Haven't used them in 4 years. So it would just reduce the amount of number that we can give out, but students will still have, still a service that we'd be offering.
Is that a follow-up? You may.
So regarding that, do you intend on in placing some sort of limit to the number of Scantrons that students already have?
So I had already started conversations with Jax about this. The limit will change. It's not really up to me to decide what that limit's going to look like. We would have to then see the amount of Scantrons that we can purchase with that money. We also potentially considered making the recommendation for next year if there happens, and this fluctuates from year to year, like this year, it's probably not going to happen, having Scantrons come out of potentially like the academic affairs coordinator's budget. But Scantrons ultimately are something that's academic. It is our responsibility to provide to the students service and programs that come with social and welfare, not necessarily aiding to your academic lives. This is something that it's unfortunate, but yeah, it is what it is.
Gel, then Holmes, then Urched, then DeMarlo.
Hi. So I remember yesterday you mentioned that it was to the Sports Club Council that there was $16,000 and only 3,000 of those dollars were used. Were you specifically talking about the athletics coordinators expenditure for your reign?
Yes and no. So what I meant was that there were $16,000 that were budgeted for the athletics coordinator and $3,000 were used on one event. It's not that only $3,000 were used. The athletics coordinator has used his $16,000 and is now requesting more money, which we're just gonna look at in the spring when we have our spring retreat. But he used his full budget. So it was more so that recommendation was, we haven't supported sports clubs in the past couple years. So it would be, since that money was available, we would be more inclined to supporting them, since one event costs $3,000 and their training essentially costs.
Is that a follow-up, Gel? You may.
Okay, so the 16,000 extra dollars that you were talking about yesterday, there's no extra $16,000 in the budget right now.
Yeah, no.
Thank you.
Holmes, Urched, DeMarlo.
Oh, hi, Daniela. Thank you for your presentation. I had two questions, if I may.
You may.
One being regarding your in case of emergency. I know this past year, we've had two, a hurricane and a almost hurricane. And I know the executive branch really put some money into helping the students. So I kind of wanted to know if what I guess the thought process was by having zero for allocations in case of emergency.
So I didn't know this, but I came to learn that our emergency allocations are in case Senate can't provide funding. So then it would come out of the Senate allocations budget. It's not necessarily for worldwide emergencies. In that case, so for example, with what happened this year with the hurricane, we just used the executive cabinet's budget, and unfortunately other cabinet members that already had their budget allocated, we were like, we're so sorry, this is something important going on and we need to support our students. And we just we reallocated our funds. It's not, the emergency allocations doesn't go to actual emergencies. It goes to if there's something technical or logistical that falls back with Senate.
And my second question would be, I see that there's 10,000 allocated to the diversity and inclusion coordinator. Would you say like, because I know you've been in exec for a while, so would you say that budget has been used, like I guess in it almost in its entirety, in which is why you base that number for this upcoming year?
Yeah. So again, what's tricky with the executive branch is that it varies from year to year, and every year it's a different person in the position. And this is what I love about the executive branch. You have the ability to make the position your own. I served as diversity and inclusion coordinator 2 years back, and I used the entirety of my $10,000 budget. It really comes down to what the person in the position has planned for the year. So for example, this year, Jade, who's our diversity and inclusion coordinator, they are using the entirety of the budget that was allocated to them. And it was that, I don't know the exact number, but it was around $10,000. It's 10,000 something. So since they're using their full budget, we're going to assume that the next administration's diversity and inclusion coordinator is going to use the full budget. And oftentimes the diversity and inclusion coordinator supports caucuses, supports MSC, different areas around campus. So it's, if they don't personally use it, it's going to get used because diversity and inclusion exists everywhere.
Comptroller Chid, I promise I'm not ignoring you. I just can't let you answer every question, but
No.
it is your turn to ask a question.
I wanted to just clarify more points.
You can do that in debate.
Okay. No, I was going to clarify like the questions in case like for little things with money that Daniela was talking about. But if you want me to wait till debate, that's fine.
Yes. Okay. Demarla?
Hi, thank you for your presentation. I was wondering, like, this is like a clarification thing. I have a couple questions.
You may.
What's the Florida Student Association?
Oh yeah, no, so fair. So the Florida Student Association is essentially a group that's comprised of all the student body presidents from all of the public Florida universities. So it's a committee for the student body presidents. And typically last year there was a lot more travel than what consists of this year. So last year, every other month you would travel to a university. There's monthly meetings. That's what the fund is primarily used for. And this year so actually next month in January, every year there's something that's called Rally and Tally. So it's essentially day at the Capitol, but statewide. So all of the student body presidents go to the Capitol and we lobby on behalf of initiatives that represents over the 200,000 students in Florida.
Okay, thank you. Another one is, do all the Scantrons usually get used, or like what happens with that budget?
So what's tricky is that we had COVID, and we had a lot of extra Scantrons. So right now we currently, Shane, correct me if I'm wrong, were there Scantrons purchased last year? Or are we still using the Scantrons that are left over from like the COVID year?
If there was a purchase of them last year, it was very minimal. So your budget this year that you have for it will probably be able to replenish a bunch of those, so that although you'll have to reduce the number that they get, it's not probably going to be a huge impact for the future year. There will be have to be a reduction, but it probably will be minimized by the fact that there'll be some left over.
Okay, thank you. And then just one last question. So I know you said the hours were decreased for 2 coordinators. Is it just those 2, or like in general?
It would be in general. So the hours are completely decreased for 2. So like those are zeroed out. And then all of the coordinators would have the reduced hours. So it would be the 12 hours a week.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah.
Gil, then Wilson.
I don't have a question anymore.
Okay. Wilson.
Move to debate.
There's been a motion to go to debate. Are there any objections? Seeing none, we're now in debate. For Jed?
Nothing really. I was just gonna clarify some points earlier. Some of the things regarding, I think it got cleared up for the most part, but like emergency allocations and whatnot, like we used pretty much our student initiative budget and we just had to move money around. It's unfortunate, but that's the way we have to go about it. Just for like exact numbers with athletics, they're like close to 20% over. There really isn't any, like we gave them 16, they blew through it just because of how much there was to do. And then D&I is used to its entirety. But other than that, yeah.
Gell, then Temple, then Wilson.
May I direct a question?
You may.
To both Austin and Daniela to Austin as well.
You may.
Thank you. So of the budget that you had for the previous administration, Megan Austin, how much of that budget was left over? And then for Daniela, how much do you predict will be left over, or will you think that the executive branch account will be zeroed out?
I'll let Austin go first. We'll just go in order of how things happen.
Let me take a few minutes to try to go back through the records and see, because since it's been a year, couple, months and everything, I don't have that
Then
number
I'll
off the
go
top
first
of my
then.
head.
So like I said earlier, unfortunately what happened with the hurricanes, that took a significant chunk of the budget that we had allocated from student initiatives, from just what we had budgeted. We spent, I think, like $10,000 alone in just lift codes. We also purchased Publix gift cards. So the whole budget is going to be used, because it's not fair. I don't think it's fair for me to tell our coordinators, oh, I know you planned X, Y, and Z. You're not going to be able to do that anymore. So the fullest extent of our budget is going to be used. I think Stephen wants to, if he can, touch it on a little bit more. He's monitoring the budget very closely. We review the budget just about every other month to make sure that we're being fiscally responsible.
Yeah, so pretty much everything what Daniela said. We spent 10 grand on Publix gift cards, another 10 extra on immediate lift codes, so people had access to it. The budget in its entirety is going to be used. The only thing that might have wiggle room is just going to be OPS, which most people will, because 2 hurricanes, so we didn't work for budgeted weeks. But we're still cutting down on that anyways. Other than that, everything else is going to be used to its fullest entirety.
Wilson, did you have an answer?
Not yet, but based off my general recollection, similar to what he just said regarding OPS, I think was some of the stuff that we had a little bit left over of, but I think the changes that they are making just because of changes across the board would address those issues.
Go.
Yeah, it was just a follow-up to that. So you had the ability to allocate $20,000 to students during an emergency thing, which is awesome. But I guess more so that wiggle room that you had, that $20,000, that just came from your initiatives, and you still believe that you will have enough money to fulfill your coordinators' positions to fulfill their initiatives. Is that what you just said? Just to clarify.
Yeah. So I understand what you're asking. I think so. This year we are fortunate enough to have that wiggle room. That wiggle room isn't going to exist next year. My hope is that if there is an emergency again, the university can do a better job at supporting its students, and it's not going to be left to student fees having to support other students. So that can go to the other things the university doesn't support. The reality of it is that wiggle room isn't going to exist next year if we still want to accomplish the programs and the services that we're used to and realistically don't exist anywhere else in the university, if not for the executive branch.
Richard, is that more answer? Yeah.
To clarify a little further, again, with the wiggle room, because of the cuts, even though we had wiggle room this year, it won't exist next year. And that's one of the nice things of the nature of our budget. We were able to make the hard decision, but as we said, like Peter's athletics budget, it's already over budget. That's one of the things to an extent. Like if we didn't have these emergencies, we didn't have to dump extra money on it immediately to support our students, we could have given him more flexibility with a larger budget, but we've had to, reel in some of our coordinators and say we can't because we have to support our students during an emergency. But unfortunately, that wiggle room will be gone next.
I think this is gonna, if you have a follow-up, I think this will address the follow-up. We had, as you can see from our long-term contracts, currently we have $72,000 within long-term contracts. Lift is something that Shane and Avery, our safety and transportation coordinator, are monitoring really, really closely. So we have this much budgeted in case not every single student, but in case students use them. If we see that the lift codes aren't being used, then this is potentially a pot of money for reallocation, which is where the 10 grand from LIFT came from. It didn't necessarily come from student initiatives. It was coming from long-term contracts, which then therefore allows for the initiatives to be completed. And then, but now since we're decreasing long-term contracts, the wiggle room comes from here. The wiggle room isn't going to exist because we can't go lower than that $41,000.
I have to let somebody else debate. Temple, Wilson, and DeMarlo.
Two quick questions, if I may.
You may.
Sorry. So regarding the LIFT long-term contract, what's the minimum threshold that you guys are able to maintain before you have to nix it entirely?
41,000.
Oh boy. All right.
It can't go any lower than that because we just won't have a contract.
Understood. And my second question is, you can be very brief in this. Given that you guys won't have much wiggle room to help students in emergencies in the next year, how will you ensure that university will actually be able to aid in emergencies? Because as we all know, the response from the university was less than stellar this year. Yeah.
So this is obviously I won't be here. Hopefully I'll be graduated. So if I am here, someone please scream at me. But essentially, so I can tell you what I did this year. So one of the things that the university did when it came specifically to the hurricane is for the students, unfortunately, that lost their homes in Arden Villas, or was it the Verge? Can't remember the name of the other apartment complex at this moment. But for those students that did suffer tragedies, there's a housing insecurity fund through UCF Cares. And that was given, those funds from the Housing Insecurity Fund were used to help the students pay rent the next month, to help the students do whatever it is that they needed to do to continue living their life. So one of the things that I specifically did is during the last Board of Trustees meeting, I specifically asked all of the trustees to donate to the Housing Insecurity Fund because it was significantly depleted. There was over $100,000. Come the time that I made the ask, there was only $7,000 left in that fund. I don't know the exact data. I asked for the numbers. I just haven't gotten it yet. And with the semester wrapping up, it's been hard to hear back from some people. So my hope is that the trustees did donate to that fund, but I can't say for certain. So again, I can't say for certain what the next administration will do, but my hope is that there will be a student body president and vice president that advocates for the university to do something. And again, I also can't speak for the decisions of the next administration, but if there was something that needed to happen, I really don't think the student coordinators who are here to support other students will say, no, don't touch my budget because I need to plan a pep rally. Don't support the other students. So I can't necessarily say if any of these things will happen for certain, but I think we're all good people, and can see when things need to be done.
Oh, sorry.
More so
You get
debate.
one.
More so debate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think I'm reasonably comfortable with what executive has provided to us as it stands. I do want to hear more from the committee as to where certain adjustments can be made. But at the moment, I am quite all right with what executive has pushed so far. Unfortunately, considering that there are cuts to be made, especially to the Scantron and Blue Book service, which to any student is rather disheartening. But given that we do have an excess surplus from COVID, we should be able to survive even with this substantial cut. And of course, I had to bring it up. It does pain me to see that governmental affairs is going to get a cut, no matter how small it is. But otherwise, I'm
sorry, Ethan.
It's quite all right. And I'm going to try and suppress the governmental affairs side of me today, but try being the operative term.
Wilson, then DeMarlo, then Orchard.
I was actually going to make a motion based off if Daniela could pull up the cuts that they had for that 13.7, because I'm in agreement with Ethan on that. I don't have the specific numbers or anything, but just kind of.
If you want to go, this is the first line.
Yeah, is there a way to just chair to kind of just approve the 13.7% cuts that they have presented? To
They're
move on
already
before we all
in-
cannibalize each other.
All of the cuts were actually submitted as a revised packet, so they're already in.
Okay, so basically the approval would just be moving on to the next
Correct.
entity. Okay. Well, I don't know if Senator DeMarla has anything, but if she can object, if not, but if so, can we move on to the next entity? I
If
don't
you
know.
want to make a motion.
Yeah.
you
Oh,
need to
who
make
is
a
the next
motion.
entity?
Okay. There's been a motion to move to the next entity. Are there any objections? Seeing none, we're now there. MSC. Yes. Thank you, Daniela.
Can everyone hear me all right? Okay. So my name is Marcus Hernandez. My pronouns are he, him, his. I am currently serving as the student director for the Multicultural Student Center. I am currently presenting for the budget year for the 2023 and 2024 financial year. Before I go through what MSC actually is, I do want to see y'all with the new structure of where we're at. We are currently under the Ginsberg Center for Inclusion and Community. We underwent a major change in terms of the structure and the mission of the university's inclusion and diversity mission. Basically, the Ginsberg Center for Inclusion and Community Engagement was established due to the Ginsberg Family Foundation. The purpose was to strengthen UCF's commitment to diversity and inclusion and to make sure that there's excellence in UCF. So this is where we're currently at. So prior to the change, civil discourse and engagement used to be social justice and advocacy. Due to the new transition and structure, it is currently rebranded to civil discourse and engagement. Under that is LGBTQ plus student support services, the Multicultural Student Center, and the Cultural Center. Under MSC, we do operate under Pride Commons and a reflection room in the downtown campus. Our mission for MSC is to create a more inclusive and equitable campus environment, and we want to enrich the university experience for supporting diverse and intentional programming for students. We want to promote awareness, cultural competency, and social responsibility throughout the university, and we want to encourage educational exploration when it comes to challenging these societal norms. Our mission includes multiculturalism, and that extends beyond the single aspect of someone's individual identity. So this could be the intersection of someone's race, ethnicity, nationality, religion, anything that makes them a person. So here's the personal structure of MSC. We have the executive board, so that's comprised of the student director, which is me, the assistant student director, the operations director, our 2 marketing directors, our 3 community and culture directors, and our pride director. I forgot to include and acknowledge the outreach and leadership director. We renamed these director positions due to wanting to scale our programming, due to our mission to enrich and ensure that the multicultural students and those with those identities feel more represented and seen on campus. We wanted to make sure that these positions were named and suitable for them. I want to go on to professional staff. We have the assistant director for the cultural center. We have the multicultural student center coordinator, and we have the LGBTQ plus student support services coordinator. Due to our programming this year, we have seen the difficulties of COVID, and reopening the university to in-person has definitely been difficult. Since campus life has been reopened to normal operations, we have moved on for hybrid programming. So due to the influx of students that are more in person, we have prioritized very intention and very engaging and very things that are suitable and representative of our students. We want to make sure that those students are feeling seen on campus because of the times we're going through right now, and also through making sure that there is a place for students here at UCF. We do definitely have a large multicultural identity population, and we want to make sure that those students are definitely being heard. Some of our common and engaging programming is Taste of UCF, which we hold during Pegasus Palooza. We reached out to 3,000 students in the arena. And the following day in Pegasus Palooza, we held Lavender Night, which reached about 2,000 students. And that was through LGBTQ plus student support services. So this year, we wanted to make sure the main vision of LGBTQ plus programming was to engage and support students in feeling welcome and included in campus life, which has always been our mission. But we wanted to make sure that this year was more engaging and supportive of those in the community. And here are examples of our successful programs. As you can see, we have a multitude of heritage programs. As I said before, we want to represent students of all cultures, not just one aspect of our identity. And as you can see here, we do a lot of collaborations and a lot of, initiatives and educational programming pieces. Furthermore, I do want to talk more about our sponsorships and partnerships, including other agencies within student government, and that includes the campus activity boards, VUCF, late nights, and more of those agencies that we are collaborating with. These agencies are not the only ones we collaborate with. We do collaborate with other nonprofits, other organizations that are outside of UCF. We collaborate with Zebra Coalition. We collaborate with the Orlando Queer Trans Asian Association. We collaborate with those outside of the Orlando community as well. We want to make sure that UCF has a more broad representation of those who are students here, because sometimes we're in our bubble, and we want to make sure that those who are students here make sure that those aren't the only things that are represented. So for our budget lines for this current year, our starting budget was $516,379, and that included the MSc programming, which is $144,000, LGBTQ plus programming, which is $25,000, and the LGBTQ plus services programming, which is around $8,000. I do want to elaborate that the LGBTQ plus programming is different from the LGBT